Greetings, YouTube. So you've been deeded a castle. This idea came to me from reading a Substack that I've got through my Kiwix app here on my phone, Kiwix, which lets you have an offline databases of information. And one of them I have is a collection of Substack conversations that are on there. And there's an entire plethora of them for different versions of D&D, and I've been looking at the Pathfinder First Edition collection, and there's like 7,000 articles. I haven't gotten that far through them yet, and I think it's 100. I think it's 10 per page, and I don't know what page I'm on, but I haven't broken 100 yet. I know that because 100 still shows up on the little bottom thing. And one of them was about if you get the deed to a castle, what happens. So we'll just say a keep, something a little bit smaller than a castle, not quite as large as a full-blown castle. So first of all, how does your party end up with a deed to a keep? You could find it. There's no reason you couldn't find a deed on somebody's body. It couldn't necessarily, it's not necessarily say part of the treasure of that the party is looking for, but on the body of somebody they find along the way to or from their current adventure, they find a deed. Now the first thing you could do is find out if the deed is still relevant, if if it's still a deed to an extent piece of property. Is there any kind of who owns it? Are there any claimants, that kind of thing? Because just finding the deed could be something in a reward in itself, in the sense that you get paid by a claimant or one of the claimants. There may be more than one claimant, and the party gets to decide who they sell it to. So that's a whole adventure in itself. Is there are multiple claimants, the party gets to figure out which one they want to sell it to and get involved in the machinations therein. So that's kind of like, a grand opportunity for an urban or at least kind of in city kind of a story, or going from estate to estate from people who are trying to get this piece of property for whatever reason, and of course finding out why they want this piece of property. What's special about this particular piece of property? Do the player characters have any shot of making a claim to it themselves? But let's say they find it, there's no current claimants, but the deed still is valid. And so they can then pay whatever they have to pay in back taxes or something. They then get that keep at dirt cheap. So whatever they're going to pay for it is, easily, probably a tenth of the price of what it would cost them just for the land, and they're getting a keep that's in some kind of condition, they don't know what. So then they go to the keep to find out what condition it's in. Now, the keep doesn't necessarily have to be in great condition. It could be still occupied by a skeleton crew of servants who are still being paid some kind of minimal stipend to keep the place functioning. It could be occupied by people who have just been living there, and they're the members of the family that always owned it, and no one ever kicked them out. But now you've got the deed, so you now own the property. And none of them ever went to the effort of figuring out that they were living essentially as squatters, and nobody questioned it. But here is a group shows up with a deed in their hand saying, hey, this property belongs to us now. You're going to have to leave. And again, then you have an entire adventure seed right there. But let's say they show up and the property is abandoned. Now, abandoned is a very loose term. I watch a channel here on YouTube called Abandoned, and it's all about different properties that people explore as urban spelunkers to look at things that have been abandoned, sometimes for as little as a few years, to places that have been abandoned for decades, and the condition they're in and the story behind them. I think it's very cool. I apologize. And so they get there, and it could be just have been abandoned 5 years ago. So the place is still in solid shape. There's not been a great deal of degradation. There may even be possessions still inside that were just mothballed. But the place is essentially move in, do some minimal amounts of repair and restocking, and you're ready to go. But what if it was abandoned 50 years ago? Now there's a whole lot more work. The building may still be sound, but the windows, if there are glass and things, the roof may need a certain amount of repair. The stables collapse and you're going to have to build a new one or something because those weren't made out of stone, or they got caught on fire and they burned or something. So there may be a certain level of repair to be done, but again, it's dirt cheap as a bargain because reconditioning this place is much less expensive than building a keep from scratch, because the building still has the bones that it can be rebuilt. But then you get there and it's been abandoned for 500 years. Okay, you've got a deed that's valid, and the only reason it's valid is because the kingdom keeps records that go back that far, and no one has ever questioned about it. And so like, hey, you want this piece of property, you pay these, this nominal amount of fee, here it's yours, and they're just not going to wash their hands of it and say, now it's not our problem, good luck. And you find the places in absolute shambles. So maybe rebuilding it is something you're going to have to do from scratch. Maybe you can cobble together a smaller structure within the larger structure and decide whether you want to rebuild it or not. And again, all of these are adventure seeds. Who lives there now? What's squatting on that spot? Is it monsters? Is it local villagers? Have the villagers have they stripped the building of the stones for their own purposes? So technically, their building, they now have their buildings made out of materials that legally belong to you. Not going to make you real popular if you say, I want those stones back, and put them back where you got them from. Yeah, that's not going to make you popular. Not to mention it's probably impossible. But that has happened. That's what happened to the pyramid at Cheops. The outside used to be covered in like alabaster that all got taken off and used by other people. It used to be a gold coated capstone. That's long gone. So what condition is it in, and what do you do with the property itself? Now, another way of getting a piece of property, which can feed into any of these things, is that you purchase it. And say you get a chance, somebody's like, that somebody's selling a piece of property, and it's cheap, and you have the opportunity to buy it, but you got to buy it blind because otherwise the sale is going to be snatched up by somebody else. Or you get awarded that deed by some powerful person, a patron, or more likely someone in the government. So some baron or count or duke, or even a prince or something, maybe even a king. Particularly if they're annoyed by the player characters. They've done something which is slightly politically embarrassing. They would really like the player characters to be not at court and somewhere else. So they find a piece of property that's still on the books. And they say, okay, let's get this deed written up, hand it to these folks, and we'll send them packing on their way. And it's a good sized piece of property. Say it's 1,000 acres, which is more than a square mile. Say it's much bigger than that. Say it's a piece of property on the keep, then it's 100 square miles, but it's all out there on the fringe. It's out on the border of the nation, and beyond that is just like foothills, and then you go into the mountains. So the player character is essentially going to be expected to go there, maintain it, collect taxes on the property from the people that will then work it and owe taxes to the player characters, and be a bulwark between the rest of the kingdom and the wild lands, if you will. That does in fact shift the focus of the campaign quite a bit, but it still could be incredibly interesting to do. Suddenly you're out there, you're having to rehabilitate a place, you're having to deal with, is there already a village there? If there is, what kind of shape are they in? They're probably going to resent the fact that they haven't been paying taxes to anybody in a while. Maybe it's been 5 or 10 years, maybe it's been 50. And the king is nice enough not to have given you a piece of property that's completely in ruins, but it's going to take quite a bit of effort to get it up to snuff. And now the villagers have a new leader. Are they happy? Who's in charge of the village? What factions might there be in the village that are going to help you or hurt you? Some of the people in that village will be thrilled that the kingdom has decided to remember they exist and get them back on the map and part of the greater kingdom superstructure so that they might get more patrols out in this neck of the woods. Now there's people living in there whose job it is to keep this zone, this estate, or I don't know, maybe it's considered a baronet or something. It's one step above. It's not quite a city, of course, but it's a property and a village on it. So it's got, maybe a couple of hundred people living there, maybe as many as 500 people living in it. Maybe it did at one time, and now it's down to 250, 200. So can you bring it back to what it was? Can you make it the bustling little community it once was? And maybe it was a bustling community because at one time there was a lot of logging in the area. And that kind of fell out when there wasn't anyone to really deal with to support the logging franchise, as well as to be a conduit to get the lumber sold to the greater, or moved into the greater kingdom. Maybe it's miners, and will the local dwarves up there in the mountains be thrilled that there are now, a bunch of adventurers who are now getting a bunch of probably humans to open up these old mines that have not been used in a while, and now they're having competition that they thought was gone. So there's lots of opportunities that you can get out of a simple deed. It isn't just a piece of paper. It is an adventure seed, potentially a campaign seed. It can be a lot going on. You could set this up and have it be a generational thing, in the sense that your players play their characters up to an X level, they get tired of them, you retire them, and then you play the next generation of adventurers from that village, that keep, maybe related to the old ones, maybe not. And then that way you have a connectivity to the original campaign. It's a continuation. It's just a continuation with a new chapter. So let's talk about keeps and deeds. The only deed I have is this one, and technically I don't have it yet. I still owe my bank quite a bit of money for this property. Though I'm hoping before I die, I will be able to hold that deed in my hands and say, this is mine. At the moment, though, I am the rightful claimant to this piece of property. It's not big. It's like a quarter acre, I think it is, maybe less than that. There's not a whole lot of property, but it's a corner lot. So I live on a corner. It means I only have jerks on two sides. So let's talk about deeds and keeps. And have you ever used this idea? Would you ever use this idea? And what do you think about my thoughts on it?